Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so glad you're here with us. I'm your host, and joining me as always to help break things down is our resident expert.
Hey everyone, it's great to be here.
So today, our mission is a little different than usual. I mean, we aren't looking at corporate spreadsheets today,
Right.
and we definitely aren't analyzing rigid sociological data.
No, definitely not today.
Right. Instead, we're unpacking a deeply emotional, just highly concentrated piece of writing. It's an excerpt from a book titled The Comeback You Didn't See Coming.
Which is such a great title.
It really is. And we're specifically looking at a chapter titled Letter to My Past Self, a Declaration of Triumph.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's a short text, but it is dense,
Right.
like really dense.
Oh, absolutely.
It's written entirely from the perspective of a triumphant, fully healed future self. And they are looking back through time, speaking directly to their past self.
Which is such an interesting framing device.
It is. And that past self, the one they're talking to, is the one who is currently in the thick of the struggle.
Yeah.
The one who feels completely buried by the demands of life right now.
Right. And we are going to deconstruct how this author reframes pain and fear and shame, not as these things to be erased or embarrassed by,
Yeah.
but as the very foundation of what they call a comeback.
Yeah.
And we're doing this because, let's be honest, you, the person listening to this right now, we all have moments where we feel small.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone does.
We all have days, or, I mean, let's be real, entire years where we feel just completely overwhelmed by the weight of the world. So you can kind of consider this letter a blueprint for emotional resilience.
And what makes this blueprint so unusual, I think, is its fundamental approach to moving forward.
Right. Because usually when we talk about success or making a massive life change or finally stepping into your own power, the advice we get is almost always about looking relentlessly forward.
Yes, exactly.
All about the vision board. You set your goals, you map out the next 5 years, and you are strictly told to just leave the past in the rearview mirror.
It's that classic, don't look back, you're not going that way mentality.
Yes.
Which, implies that forward momentum requires a kind of historical amnesia.
Right. Like you just have to forget it all.
Exactly. You're supposed to just lock away the messy parts of your history, throw away the key, and keep marching toward the horizon.
Which sounds great on a bumper sticker, I guess. But then you stumble across something like this letter that just completely flips that script.
Yeah, it really does.
It suggests the exact opposite. It argues that the only way to actually become who you are meant to be is to turn around, walk right back into the darkest part of your history, and have a direct, face-to-face reckoning with the version of yourself that was struggling the most.
It is the absolute definition of confronting your shadows. And the text, it wastes no time doing exactly that.
Okay, let's unpack this. The author starts with 3 very simple but incredibly heavy words directed at their past self. They just say, I see you.
Mm-hmm.
They don't start with, hey, cheer up, or look at all the great stuff we have in the future.
Right, no toxic positivity here.
Exactly. They start by looking at this past version of themselves and saying, I see the fear, the sadness, the moments you felt small, unseen, or unworthy.
Yeah.
The future self explicitly says, I faced the shadows you were too afraid to meet. I held the grief you were too scared to feel. I embraced the anger you tried to hide.
Notice how specific that inventory is, too. Shadows, grief, anger.
Yeah.
They are naming the exact things the past self was avoiding.
I was reading this, and it made me think about how we handle, unacknowledged past trauma or pain or shame. It's like a ghost that haunts a house.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Like when you're the past self, you are terrified of the ghost. You hide under the covers. You pretend the creaking floorboards are just the wind.
Right, just ignoring it.
Right. You do absolutely everything you can to avoid acknowledging that there is a ghost out there in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
But a ghost only stops being terrifying when you turn on all the lights, walk right up to it, and look directly at it.
That is such a good way to put it.
And that's what the future self is doing here. They're turning on the lights. But I was honestly, I was a bit puzzled by this approach initially.
How so?
Well, if I'm writing a letter to cheer myself up, my instinct is to say, don't worry, I fixed you, it all gets better.
Sure, yeah, that's the natural instinct.
But the author deliberately avoids that. Why start with I see you and explicitly say everything you felt, the fear, the shame, the heartbreak was real, It mattered.
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychological mechanism of radical self-acceptance.
Okay.
If the future self came back and said, I fixed you, it implies that the past self was broken to begin with.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. It implies that those feelings of fear, shame, and heartbreak were a malfunction, like a bug in the system that needed to be patched out.
Right. It would be dismissive, like saying, oh, you were just overreacting.
Exactly. And dismissing pain doesn't make it go away, it actually amplifies it. From a neurological standpoint, there is a massive cognitive load involved in emotional suppression.
A cognitive load.
Yeah, psychological research consistently shows that actively ignoring a strong emotion is like, it's like running a heavy background app on your phone.
Oh, that just constantly drains the battery.
Yes, you might be smiling and going to work, but your nervous system is exhausted because it's spending a huge amount of energy keeping that closet door shut so the ghost doesn't get out.
That makes perfect sense. The exhaustion isn't just from the problem itself, it's from the effort of pretending the problem isn't there.
Precisely. By saying it was real and it mattered, the future self is doing something profoundly relieving. They are validating the negative emotions rather than dismissing them. And this immediately closes that exhausting cognitive loop. The author doesn't view the past self as a broken thing that needed repairing. They view the past self as someone who was carrying a heavy, absolutely necessary load.
Right.
By validating the struggle, the future self establishes a bridge of internal trust. It's saying, I am not here to judge you for struggling. I am here to validate that what you went through was genuinely hard.
And the text makes that explicit, too.
Yeah.
The future self says, I want you to know you are not broken.
Mm-hmm.
They reassure the past self by stating, but listen closely, I survived it all, and I'm okay now. I'm happy. I'm alive. I'm whole.
It's the ultimate reassurance. The
Yeah.
ghost didn't kill them.
Right. But this brings up a practical problem, though. I mean, acknowledging that the heavy backpack is real and turning on the lights to look at the ghost, it's a relief.
Yeah,
But it doesn't empty the backpack. The ghost is still standing in the hallway.
sure.
So how does the author suggest we actually metabolize all that accumulated pain once it's out in the open?
Well, that is the pivotal shift in the text. The author moves from merely witnessing the pain to actively utilizing it. It's a shift from observation to alchemy.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Mm.
The author talks about the pain, the mistakes, the doubts, and they don't say they just managed to move past them.
No, they don't.
They say they were fuel. And there's this one specific line that really caught my attention. The future self says, every pier, every night you thought you'd break, every time you minimized yourself for safety, it became the fire in my soul.
Yeah, that line is powerful.
It really is. And I want to pause on that specific phrase, minimizing yourself for safety. Because in the moment when you are doing that, you feel incredibly weak.
It is one of the most common yet deeply shaming human experiences.
Biting your tongue when you know you should have spoken up.
Yes.
Shrinking your personality to make a fragile person in the room feel more comfortable.
Mm.
Or, staying in a toxic job or relationship because the unknown outside of it felt too dangerous.
Right.
When you do those things, the internal narrative is almost always, I am a coward.
And that's exactly why we need to look at the psychology behind why we minimize ourselves in the first place.
Okay, let's hear it.
If we connect this to the broader science of human behavior, we see that shrinking is not an act of cowardice. It is a highly evolved survival mechanism.
Really?
Yeah. When we think of the nervous system responding to a threat, we usually think of fight or flight.
Right, the classic responses.
But there are other responses, specifically freeze and fawn. Fawning is when a person subconsciously adopts people-pleasing or submissive behaviors to diffuse conflict.
Oh, to secure their own physical or emotional safety.
Exactly.
So it's a built-in defense mechanism. It's not a character flaw.
It is a threat mitigation strategy. Historically, from an evolutionary standpoint, being rejected by your tribe meant death.
Right.
So your brain is wired to prioritize belonging over authenticity when it senses danger. You shrink to survive. The tragedy is that we later judge our survival tactics as moral failures. We tell ourselves we are weak. But what the author is doing here is fundamentally changing that narrative from victimhood to empowerment.
By calling it fuel.
Yes. By framing that specific, shameful pain as fuel, the future self is rewriting the history of the past self.
They're changing the meaning of it entirely.
They are saying you weren't just suffering pointlessly, you weren't a coward, you were actively generating the raw energy needed for me to survive today. It gives the suffering A retroactive purpose.
I look at this process like a forge.
A forge, meaning like the pain is the heat. Walk us through that.
Well, think about a blacksmith working with raw metal. The conditions inside a forge are brutal.
Yeah, very intense.
Right, there's intense heat, massive pressure, and the literal violent pounding of a hammer on an anvil. If that piece of metal had feelings, it would think it was being destroyed.
It would think the heat was a punishment for being inadequate.
Exactly. But the heat and the pounding aren't meant to destroy the metal. They are the exact mechanisms required to temper it, to align its molecular structure, and to make it unbreakable.
Like into a sword or a shield.
Right. The author is saying the moments you felt you were being hammered into nothing were actually the forge creating your capacity for resilience. The pain became the fire that, as the text explicitly says, carried them to clarity, to courage, to strength, and to joy.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism of the text. The forge isn't comfortable, but it is entirely necessary for the transformation.
Yeah.
And the text points to a very specific destination for all this tempered metal, all this energy. The future self says that this fire means they will rise fully awake, fully alive, and unapologetically whole.
Unapologetically whole. That feels like the key distinction here.
It is, because the goal isn't just survival. It's not just limping across the finish line and collapsing.
Right.
The goal is a vibrant, unapologetic existence where you don't have to utilize that fawn response anymore. You don't have to shrink. The past self shrank and endured the forge so that the future self could expand.
The past self shrank so the future self could expand. I love the way that frames the relationship.
Me too.
It creates this beautiful partnership between who you were and who you are becoming, rather than a rivalry. But it does leave me with a lingering question about the end result.
Okay, what is it?
If this intense fire of pain and mistakes is the fuel, what exactly is the destination? What does this triumphant comeback actually look like in everyday practical life?
Well, the climax of the letter describes exactly who the author has become as a result of the struggle. They define the triumph through very specific, deliberate actions.
So what does this all mean? Because I want to push back a little bit on our cultural understanding of the word comeback.
Oh, please do.
When we hear that word, society usually defines a comeback as a massive, highly visible external success.
Yeah.
It's the classic sports movie montage, right? The underdog trains in the snow, wins the championship on national television, gets a massive contract, and proves all the haters wrong.
Yeah, Rocky running up the steps.
Exactly. Or it's the disgraced business person who goes bankrupt and then builds a billion-dollar empire just to show everyone they could. We are taught to expect a comeback to be loud. We expect it to be wealthy, and we expect this to involve some sort of tangible trophy that everyone else can see.
Because we crave the external validation of our suffering. We want an audience for our redemption.
Exactly. We want people to see that we won. But in this text, the comeback is entirely internal.
It is.
The letter says, you'll know it led you to me, to a me who speaks truth, who sets boundaries, who prioritizes heart without guilt, to a me who is alive, fierce, and unstoppable. There's no mention of money or status or revenge against the people who hurts him. The grand climax, the big comeback, is simply the ability to set a boundary. The comeback is living without guilt. That feels almost subversive compared to what we are usually taught success looks like.
It is incredibly subversive, and I think it perfectly validates your pushback against the societal definition.
Okay, good.
Because if we look at it psychologically, what is the actual value of an external comeback? The money, the trophy, the revenge. If internally you are still terrified, still fawning, and still shrinking yourself to keep it.
Right. If you're miserable inside, what's the point?
Exactly. The ultimate victory described in this source material isn't external dominance. The victory is the presence of radical authenticity. Being alive, fierce, and unstoppable is an internal state of being that is notoriously difficult to achieve.
Because setting a boundary is often much scarier than trying to win a trophy.
Absolutely. Because setting a boundary triggers all of those evolutionary fears we talked about earlier.
The fear of being kicked out of the tribe.
Yes. When you set a boundary, you risk disappointing someone. You risk conflict. You risk being expelled from the tribe. Rewiring your nervous system to tolerate the discomfort of disappointing others is monumental work.
It really is.
That's why the text gives the past self, which, remember, represents you, the listener, in your current moments of struggle, a very specific set of instructions. It says, hold your head high, walk through the discomfort, feel the pain, let it teach you.
Let it teach you. That implies you can't just fast forward through the bad parts.
That is the core insight of the entire excerpt. The comeback relies entirely on the past self's willingness to endure the present discomfort.
You cannot bypass the forge.
Exactly. You have to walk through it. You have to feel the pain to let it become the fuel. If you numb the pain, if you constantly distract yourself from it, or if you run away from it, you are depriving your future self of the very fuel they need to become unstoppable.
You can't go around the ghost in the hallway. You have to walk right through it.
And doing so is an act of profound bravery. The text concludes with a powerful affirmation of that bravery. It says, "Because the comeback is coming, and you are the reason it exists." It places the heroism squarely on the shoulders of the person who is currently struggling. The person who is hurting today, the one who feels completely buried, is actually the hero of the story because they are the one doing the heavy lifting of enduring.
You are the reason it exists. It just shifts the perspective so completely.
It really does.
It means that even on the days you feel like you are doing absolutely nothing but just barely surviving, you are actually doing the most important work possible. You are gathering the fuel. You are surviving the forge so that the future version of you can thrive.
It's a profound act of self-love projected across time. The future self signing off with all the love, fire, and courage I have, cements that this entire exercise isn't a critique of the past. It's an embrace of it.
Let's bring all of this together. We've taken a deep dive into some incredibly moving source material today.
We definitely have.
To summarize the core message of this excerpt from The Comeback, you didn't see coming. You are not broken. The cognitive load of pretending you aren't hurting is exhausting, and it is entirely okay to acknowledge the ghost in the hallway. Your struggles, your doubts, even the moments you feel most ashamed of, where your nervous system forced you to make yourself small just to stay safe. Those are not evidence of your failure. They are your fuel.
Exactly.
And the comeback you are working toward isn't about proving anything to the outside world with a flashy trophy. It is ultimately about finding the internal courage to set boundaries, to speak your truth, and to prioritize your own heart without carrying the weight of guilt.
It's about utilizing every piece of your history, the dark and the light, to become unapologetically whole.
So to you, listening to this right now, whatever heavy load you might be carrying, whatever shadows you are currently facing in your own hallway, I want to remind you of the promise in this letter.
Yeah.
The struggles you endure today are actively shaping the version of you who will rise. You are the reason the comeback exists.
The endurance itself is the alchemy.
As we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to mull over, something to explore on your own.
I love this part.
We've spent all this time analyzing a letter written from the future to the past. So let's flip it to your reality. Imagine your future self, let's say 5 or 10 years from now.
Okay.
Imagine that version of you, fully healed, fiercely authentic, completely free of guilt, and entirely unstoppable. Imagine them sitting down at a desk to write you a letter right now. What specific struggle, what exact discomfort in your life today would that future version of you look back and thank you for having the courage to endure?
That's a powerful thought.
Because remember, we can't just leave our history in the rearview mirror. Sometimes the only way to truly move forward is to realize that the heavy backpack you are carrying today is filled with the exact fuel you need for tomorrow.